In the book of Matthew, chapter 8, Jesus is in the boat with his disciples. They go out onto the Sea of Galilee. They're out there for a while. And as they're out there, Jesus goes to the stern and he falls asleep. Huddles up on the corner, takes a nap. He's tired. He's been performing miracles all day. He's exhausted. And he falls asleep. Now, while he's asleep, a storm arises in the Sea of Galilee over the top of them, and waves are crashing over the top of the boat. Wind is crashing and blowing it, pushing it to and fro. And the disciples start to freak out. They're flipping out, and as they're worried that they're about to die, they look over and Jesus is still sound asleep, at peace. They run over to Jesus and they wake him up. Lord, we're going to die. Don't you care that we're about to die? This storm has taken us out. And Jesus stands up and rebukes the wind. He rebukes the waves. He rebukes the storm. And he looks at them and says, "O ye of little faith, why did you doubt me? You just saw me performing miracles time and time again. All day long you saw how powerful I am. But when a little storm comes up, you're worried that you're going to fall, that you're going to die, that I've deserted you. Why?" Then a few chapters later in Matthew chapter 14, Jesus, in chapter 13 rather, we're going to start there. Jesus had fed 5,000 people with just a few loaves of bread and a few little fish. Great magnitude saw how glorious he was and how powerful he was, and they wanted to raise him up as a king, and they wanted to follow him because he provided for their daily needs at that moment. Now, Jesus sent the disciples again out onto the boat to take it easy for a little while, relax, and he went off to pray. And then at the nighttime hour, Jesus walks on the water towards the disciples. And they're freaking out again. "It's a ghost. What is that out there? It's scary." And he says, "It's me." And Peter, being the bold disciple that he was, the bold and the foolish, the bold disciple speaks out, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come out onto the water to you." And Jesus says, "Come." Peter climbs out of the boat, and I can't imagine what kind of faith it took to climb out of a boat onto a sea. As he walks out towards him, he sees Jesus and he's walking. I can only imagine what it's like. He's looking around and he's walking on the water towards Jesus. But as he gets out towards Jesus, the waves start crashing around him and the storm's raging around him, and he starts to get scared. And he's looking around and he takes his eyes off of Jesus. And he's freaking out, and as he's about to go under, he reaches up and screams for help. And Jesus reaches down and pulls him up out of the water and says, "Why did you doubt me? You just saw me feed 5,000 people with a few loaves of bread and a few fish. But the storms come around you and the waves start crashing and beating against you. And you immediately take your eyes off of me and you worry about life around you. And we are all saying, 'Woe is me.' As the storm of life comes all around us, we cry, 'Where are you? Why aren't you taking care of this? Why aren't you saying, aren't you worried that I'm about to drown? Aren't you worried that I'm about to fail, that I'm about to fall away, that I'm into gloom and despair? And life is awful, and we've been thrown lemon after lemon after lemon, and life is miserable.' Too many times we're like the disciples, and we cry out, 'Help us. We're scared.' O ye of little faith, why do we doubt him? Why do we doubt his power? Why do we let the storms that rage within us, the storms that rage around us, bring us down?" Peter had the right idea. He got out of the boat, but as soon as life started beating him down, he took his eyes off of what needed to be focused on. A young shepherd boy was sent to the battle lines to check on the war and to take his brother some cheese and some bread. And when he gets up there, he sees this giant, this Goliath of a man that is taunting his army, his people's army, to taunting his God and putting him down. And this little 12, 13-year-old boy says, "Why didn't somebody do something about it? I will." And he goes to the battle line with just a sling and a stone, and young David takes out Goliath. And he climbs on top of him and he cuts off his head with a sword. And he stands there with the head of a giant, the biggest storm that they had ever faced as the nation of Israel, the biggest adversary, the biggest foe. Excuse me. He's standing there with his head held high. And as he's walking down the streets later, this young boy is praised by everybody of how great Saul, their king, was, but how even more great David was, and how great of a warrior. And everybody loved David. He became this warrior, this fighter, this soldier that everybody loved and everybody admired, except for Saul, because Saul hated him because he was worried that David was going to take his kingdom, which he was. He had already been anointed by the prophet of God. David then begins to get chased by Saul. Saul threatens to kill him day and night, comes after him with all kinds of things, chases him into a cave. He has armies after him all over the place. David has to resort to going against Saul's enemies, to getting help from them. That's how bad it got for David. Time and time again, he had the opportunity to kill Saul, but he couldn't do it because he knew that God had anointed Saul. David's life was in peril, day and night, but he always remained true to God. He then takes over the kingdom. He becomes King David, not just shepherd boy David, not just David the slayer of Goliath. He becomes King David, and everybody loves King David. Everybody. And he has the faithfulness of God in his life, and he lives his life day and night, honoring and serving God. And he is a man after God's own heart. Until one fateful night, he's sitting on his balcony, and he sees the woman Bathsheba, who's married to Uriah the Hittite, who's not David's wife. And in one stupid moment, he breaks every commandment, every rule, every regulation that God had laid out before the nation of Israel. He takes it all away. And his life is in turmoil then. He then has Uriah killed. He takes Bathsheba as his own. He loses that child as she becomes pregnant and has the baby. And then they have other children. Life starts to get back when he gets his heart back towards God. But the turmoil isn't. You see, time and time again, David had ups and he had downs. He had valleys, he had peaks. He had storms that would rage against him. He had children, many children. One day his son decided he wanted David's daughter, so he raped her. And then his other son, Absalom, was enraged about that and sought vengeance and killed him, and then he fled. David's now lost a son because of his transgressions. He's lost a son because he raped his daughter. His favorite son killed that son and then fled. And in the meantime, he's decided, you know what? I'm going to overtake the kingdom. I'm going to overthrow my dad and I'm going to be king. And he rose up armies against King David. You think you've had storms and issues and tribulation in your life? Have you ever been chased by a king and an army? Have you ever had your life turned upside down because of your mistakes? Have you ever had one of your sons rape your other daughter, and then your other son kill him, and then that son tries to overtake your kingdom? That's a bad day. That is a rotten, no good life. What do you do in that time? What happens? Where do you go? Thankfully, we have the Psalms that David wrote at that breaking point. At that point in his life when all was falling apart around him. When his son was trying to overthrow his kingdom. When he had lost a son. When his daughter had been raped. When he was still dealing with the agony of the Bathsheba and Uriah and the life that turned him away from God for a short moment. We have two Psalms, Psalm chapter 3 and chapter 4. The first one is a song of the morning. O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God. But you, O Lord, you are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. I cried aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy hill. I lay down and slept. I woke again from the Lord, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. For you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessings be on your people. And then, chapter 4, an evening song. Answer me when I call you, O God, my righteousness. You have given me relief when I was in distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer. O men, how long shall my honor be turned into shame? How long will you love vain words and seek after lies? But know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord hears when I call him. Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. There are many who say, who will show us some good? Lift up the light from your face upon us, O Lord. You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound. In peace I will both lie down and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. Arise, O Lord. That's what David did. When life was at its roughest, when he is at his wit's end and life is falling apart and the storms rage against him, what did he cry out? Arise, O Lord. I know you're there. I know you haven't forsaken me. I know that you haven't left me. You have blessed me beyond all measure. And his evening prayer, there's joy in my heart, more so than those that when their crops are abounding in many numbers. I have you and I know that. What did Peter do when he cried out? When he saw that life was beating him down and he was about to fall short and fall sinking into the water, save me, Lord. What did the disciples do when the storm scared them, that they thought they were going to die? Wake up, Lord. When life is coming at you at all directions and the storm is beating you down, fall down on your knees and pray to God. Arise, O Lord. But don't forget, he hasn't left you and he hasn't forsaken you. He is still there, even if he's sitting in the stern of the boat taking a nap. Even if you've taken your eyes off of him, he hasn't left you. Prophet Isaiah had this to say in Isaiah chapter 54, verse 10. He says, for the mountains may depart and the hills be removed, but my steadfast love shall not depart from you, and my covenant of peace shall not be removed, says the Lord, who has compassion on you. Jesus brings us peace. Satan brings us storms. The peace is always going to be greater in the storm because we know who's in control and who's in charge and who will never leave us nor forsake us. Because of his great steadfast love, we are not consumed by Satan and his worries and his fears and his doubt. So, no matter what storm is coming at you, no matter what life is thrown at you, no matter what Satan is coming at you, no matter how hard he is hitting you right now, remember when David was at his lowest, when he was at his peak of thinking that life was done, when everybody's telling him that God is no longer with you, what did he do? He prayed. He prayed, arise, O Lord. That's what we've got to do. When life comes at you, pray. Have a great week.